Welcome to All Things Moore County. Moore County's weekly radio show highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyles, community, and neighborhoods. And now, from 4 Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Hey, Dorothy. Welcome, everyone. This is All Things Moore County. Good morning. Hey, Dorothy, I heard we had a little bit of a snafu on Saturday.
Yeah, technology.
What happened? I just my pay grade.
Yeah, something went wonky in the log trafficking system, and it loaded the wrong day. So either I loaded something in wrong, or it just decided it didn't like Saturday and was going to skip to Sunday. Thank you. So the wrong log got loaded, and things got kind of wonky. And unfortunately, Steve didn't catch it until about the beginning of your show. So we tried to get as much on as we could.
That's above my pay grade. What
Pretty
you
much.
just said. but it happens so infrequently.
Yeah.
But there's still a podcast of the show available, so people who might have tried to catch it could always listen to it on the podcast.
Yep.
We're running about a month now, 4 straight shows, talking about education, talking about providing nets for students, talking about mentoring, talking about the haves and the have-nots. And we're going to continue it this week, and we're just about, 3.5 weeks away from the start of school here in Moore County. So education and school is a big topic on a lot of people's minds.
Yep.
Last year was the first year for the Father Capodanno High School in Vass. And if you're like me, and probably a lot of people in Moore County, they might not be familiar with it. We're going to change that today.
Cool.
I'm being joined by the chairman of the board, Mike Erwin, who I had a chance to meet through Bob Klug. A couple of weeks ago, Bob called me, and every time he picks up the phone, he's always got something good and something interesting to talk about. And sure enough, Bob's a great conduit and was able to put us together. So, Mike, I want to say good morning. I love talking to you on the phone this past weekend. You're high energy. And I thought, wow, we're going to have a great conversation today. Welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity. Really excited to share more about the mission and the vision, about Father Capodanno High School, and just all the various things that the school does differently, and really excited to have that conversation.
Where are you from? You're not from the South?
So real quick background. So born and raised in Syracuse, New York.
Okay.
So I went to Christian Brothers Academy up there. Graduated in 1998.
Did you really? Okay.
Yes, sir. Went to West Point, and I graduated. So 9/11 took place at the start of my senior year. So that fundamentally changed everything for me. I thought I was going to do 5 years in the military and move back to Syracuse. Instead, I ended up doing 13 years on active duty, including some time right here at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Deployed to Iraq once, Afghanistan twice, and then went back to graduate school, and I studied positive psychology and leadership at the University of Michigan, and then went back to West Point to serve as a teacher, where I'm still in the Army Reserves. I serve as an assistant professor in leadership and psychology. So that eventually brought us back here. My wife and I, we got married right here at Sacred Heart in town back in 2008. And I just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. And so when I left active duty, we really looked at all the places around the entire country where we might want to move to. And we came back here to Pinehurst because we just love it here. So I'm originally from New York, but that's the journey that brought me here.
So we have that in common. I'm also from Brooklyn, but a little bit lower than Syracuse. It always amazes me how people evolve and get to Moore County. And even when I was listening to you on the phone the other day, the only part of South that I thought you would have been from would have been the South part of New York State.
Yeah.
That's about it.
That's pretty close to it. I've got this weird accent because I spent a lot of time in the North, but I don't have certainly not the New York City style accent. But
you've got a Type A cadence, which we like.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell me about Father Capodanno High School and how you got involved.
Yeah, so about a little under 2 years ago, so January 2017, a few parents who were in the military and we met and started talking about the likelihood that there could be a Catholic high school here in Moore County, because my children and some of their children went to St. John Paul II Catholic School, but that school basically went to 8th grade. And so from there, students either have to go north to continue their Catholic education up in Raleigh, so at Cardinal Gibbons or St. Thomas More Academy,
Right.
or they could go to, Pinecrest, Union Pines, the O'Neill School, Sandhills Classical. So they've got options, but there isn't an option where the Catholic faith is at the center of the educational experience. And so we talked about the feasibility of it, and then he said, hey, guess what? I've actually got a kid who's in 8th grade right now, so do you think we can get something up and running by the start of the next school year, which is like 6 months away? And, I've started several other nonprofit organizations, and I have seen what it takes to be able to get those off the ground. And the amount of lifting that's required to get a school off the ground
Right.
is even more.
Crazy.
And so I said, geez, I'm not really sure if we can get this thing up and ready and have the doors open, in 7 months from right now. But that's exactly what we did last year.
How many, so your first year, how many students do you have enrolled?
So we open up with just a 9th grade, and our plan is to basically grow each grade. So this year, as we start school, we're going to have 10th grade, but 3 9th graders last year. And as we're now looking at the incoming class right now, we've got right now 3 signed up and enrolled for 9th grade starting this year. But as we'll talk about a little bit later, we've got an open house on Monday, August 6th,
Right.
and we're expecting a pretty good turnout and hoping to get probably about 4 or 5 more students to enter in 9th grade with us to start the 2018-19 school year.
The beginning of something like this requires baby steps, and yet your enthusiasm is off the charts. So you are going to start recruiting. You have an event, and that's going to be at the school on the 6th of August. When do you start school this year?
So our first day of school is August 22nd.
Okay.
So the open house is on the 6th, so it's about 2.5 weeks before that first day of school. So, we're definitely confident that there's going to be some people out there who are not aware of Father Capodanno High School as an option yet, who are going to take a hard look at it. And of course, there's some people out there who are aware of our school. However, we just opened up our new building location. Really, for the first year, we had a small little office above the parish offices at St. Anthony's in Southern Pines. And so now we've got this 8,000 square foot building with 4 acres in the back. It's right there along Highway 1 where Camp Easter Road meets Highway 1.
Yep.
And not just that, but the entire layout and the way that the entire building is now is just really innovative. And we think that when parents and when students get in there and see that, they can envision themselves going there 5 days a week for class.
I have some very, very good friends who have 4 children, 3 of whom are at St. John Paul. And they are in the process of moving from West End to Southern Pines. Their children are of the age where a lot is required of their mom to get them to school every day. And they've made a commitment to positioning themselves to be as close to the school as possible, and to do so, to move.
Yeah.
Big commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when especially when you're talking about how important like your children's education is.
Yeah.
There's various, obviously, multiple options out there. There's some charter schools now, within Moore County. But for families who really value that Catholic education, and especially the focus on virtue and character and on faith and how to integrate all that together. Those are, when you look at it in the big picture of life, those are small sacrifices, I think, to make, even though they certainly feel big in the moment. When you look at the long-term effect, that they have, I think that a lot of times people see, just how, big of an impact that education has on their life. So I'm not surprised to hear that, people would make that sacrifice and move to be closer to the school.
Yeah. We've had a conversation on the show just a couple of weeks ago about trying to save kids from falling between the cracks in our public school system. And it's something that people are always trying to do, but it's very difficult to have 100% success rate.
Sure.
That's a challenge you look like you would relish.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is obviously, there's, my dad was the director of child abuse department back in Syracuse, New York, on the police department, when I was growing up. And so had from a very young age, an awareness, of some of the challenges and issues that some children face growing up. And so whether it's not getting, food, or enough nutrition, or having a bed to sleep in, or safety and security, there's obviously a lot of challenges out there in the world and certainly in our country. And like you said, it is challenging, and schools, I think, do a great job at providing as many of the resources and as much of that emotional support that they possibly can to help children who, I guess, we classify as being at risk or high risk, or at the poverty level. But for sure, it's something at our school that we are welcome. We've got scholarship opportunities. We have people who step forward and come forward and said, hey, we are willing to help fund, so that if a child cannot afford it, but this is something that they and their parents really want, that we're going to make this happen. So we're excited by that opportunity to serve those children and their families.
You have to have a servant's heart to do this.
Absolutely, and that cuts to the core of the Catholic faith. So much of what we talk about as Catholics is the importance of not just Scripture and not just reading the Bible and knowing what you're supposed to do and talking about it and studying it from a theological perspective, but really walking the walk,
right?
And really making sure that you are proving that love of neighbor through your actions and through your interactions with other people. And so that's a huge part of our focus to develop within our staff, but certainly within our students, especially starting right when they come in at age 14, 15 years old. We know that teenagers are at a different point developmentally, where a lot of the focus is on themselves.
Right.
It's on me, and it's on what can I get out of this, or how is this going to impact me? And we really want to start to change that mindset and really get them thinking less about themselves and more about other people, because that service mindset is transformative, not just to how you live your life, but to your well-being. Because we know that one of the fastest ways that you can be miserable is to focus on yourself, because we all have our own problems, our own challenges. But the more you flip it and you focus on other people and how can I be of service and of value to other people, that does wonders, ironically, for us as people.
I can only remember when I was 14, 15, and 16. I was on my own island, and everything around me was a planet around me. I was a sun. When did you evolve? Do you remember that time? I mean, everything was about you. Your parents were sort of there for you, and it was your life. And, oh, by the way, there was a cast of characters around me.
So I think that it's, for most of us, it's not like a switch that we just flip.
Right.
It's something that's it's the aggregate. It's the effect of a lot of little things over time, and in fact, over many years. For me, I definitely remember going to Christian Brothers Academy. My Catholic high school education was really formative in helping to set that foundation, because the Lasallian brothers, they had very much that mindset of service and others before self, and that was great. But again, even in that process, it wasn't like, wow, everything I was doing was constantly thinking about how does this affect other people. And so, that was the foundation for sure. But then, I went on to West Point, and a lot of the focus there was on you're joining a profession of arms. You're joining a profession that is about service to the nation. It's about sacrificing your own good and what you want to do for the greater good of the nation and of the world. And so that aggregate, over time, certainly, built within me that increased understanding of why it's so important to think about other people. But I'll tell you that for me, the point where it really switched, and I kind of crossed that chasm, if you will, was when I was 30 years old and I went to graduate school at the University of Michigan, and I studied positive psychology. And I looked at about 20 years worth of data and 20 years worth of research, which basically showed how important it was to think about other people, how important it was to interact effectively with other people if we want to be happier and have better well-being ourselves. So that, to me, again, starting back to CBA, back in when I was 14 years old until I was 32, that 18-year journey that had a lot of twists and turns and by no means was perfect, really helped get me to this point where I came to have a much deeper appreciation for serving others and being involved in their lives instead of focusing just on what's in this for me or what's the best thing for me right now.
Yeah. You hear the common phrase sometimes when people are down or they're woe is me, professional victim. The advice is get outside of yourself. Go share yourself with others. And it does work.
Yeah. It does, and there's the research to prove it. And
Right.
again, go bring this back to like this high school age. Thinking about 14, 15, 16-year-old young men and women.
Yeah.
That's not something that is intuitive to them. It's not something that instinctively that they understand. And oh, by the way, the message that a lot of the world gives us, our country via social media, and very much what we see is, take care of yourself.
Right.
Do you
Right.
and take care of number one. Right. A lot of that mindset. And even, from a marketing standpoint, people would say, hey, go take care of yourself. Go buy what you want. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think you need to have an honest conversation and say, if that dominates a lot of my psyche and that dominates a lot of my mindset, that's a problem.
Today, it's more of a problem than ever.
Mm-hmm.
I want to sell my television. I don't want to watch anymore.
Yeah. I got rid of cable 2 years ago for that very reason.
Seriously, I watch less and less TV in the last 2 years than I ever have. I just can't do it. And the kids, what kind of message are they getting?
Think about the challenges is being a kid today growing up and being a teenager, and you've got the hormone changes and you've got like all these other changes, but then you have so many of these examples, and not just in the TV shows or in what people see, but then in the commercials and what's being marketed to people, the stuff that you see on advertisements. So it's just really, it's tough. It's tough being, I think, especially a teenager in our country today, because again, the message is very clear, like, hey, take care of yourself, focus on you. And again, we know that is one of the surest ways to hurt our own well-being. And by the way, we see this data reflected right now over the past 5 years. The rise in anxiety, the rise in depression, the rise in suicide for teenagers is just off the charts. I mean, right now, 25.1%, 1 out of 4 teenagers in America today, has a diagnosable, form of anxiety from moderate or mild or moderate up to very severe. And I can see why. Like, you feel like you look around and you think about the economy of the future and all this technology that's changing things, and you see like all these factors going on in your life. You see what your friends are doing like in real time. Think about it. You used to, when you were a kid growing up, if you missed the party, you found out on Monday.
Right.
Now, like, you see
That's so true.
You see that it's going on like on Instagram or on Snapchat or on some sort of social media right now, and you realize that you're not there. So the challenges that children face are really steep, I believe, today. And so our entire strategy at our school is really based around how do we think differently about developing our students so that they're better equipped from an emotional position and from a psychological position and from a faith-based position to be able to more effectively understand and to navigate this world that they're growing up in.
One of the most reassuring things you can tell a parent, you can tell a 14, 15, or 16-year-old something to try to help them become a servant leader, and they might just look at you and roll their eyes, but guess what? You've laid the first sheet of a foundation that builds over time, and when they look back, they'll realize, oh my gosh, that stuff, that's what I heard, and it does start to build a foundation.
Exactly, and you never know when it might click for somebody.
That's right.
But even in that, so in our first years, to talk a little bit about some of the details. So out at Prancing Horse, our students went out there basically every week, every Wednesday, because at our school we've got a bit of a different model that I can share a little bit about. We have class on Monday and Tuesday, and Thursday and Friday, but on Wednesday is we go to Mass in the morning, and then we do service for 3 hours, and then we focus
here's what I want. I want to start that in the second set.
Yep. Okay, great.
The health and I have a ton of questions to ask you. Dorothy, I think the time's going to go very fast today. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be right back speaking with Mike Erwin, and we're talking all about Father Vincent Capodanno High School. Thank you. Welcome back to the second set of All Things Moore County. Dorothy?
Yes.
You think Mike can move and influence people?
Gee, I don't know.
I don't know.
Think,
What do you think? I think so.
I think so, yeah.
Fascinating conversation with Mike Erwin. He's the chairman of the board of the Father Capodanno High School, and your enthusiasm is unbelievably contagious. You were starting at the end of the first set to talk a little bit about the day-to-day model and the mindset, but all the basic tenets of the things you were talking about for kids, it's so important to hear.
Absolutely.
I'm fascinated.
Yeah, so and maybe just kind of unpacking that a little bit. So I'd say one of the things we learned from my time up at West Point, so I'm an assistant professor there in the Army Reserve. So I go back every summer and I teach a course in leadership and psychology. At West Point, a cadet's grade point average is actually only 55% of their academics, and then 30% comes from their military and 15% comes from their physical. So the reason West Point does that is it says, look, if the military and the physical development of future Army officers is important, we have to assess it. We have to say that this counts towards your overall standing. So what we've done at Father Capodanno is we've basically extrapolated that and are doing the same thing. So a student at our school's grade point average is 70% a reflection of their academic grades in our courses, but then it's 30% a reflection of their service, their character growth, and their leadership development. And now there's leadership opportunities around all the time in classrooms. Our students, they are the ones, we don't have the budget to go out there and to hire janitors. So our students are the ones who keep our building in order. So there's leadership opportunities there, but there's also these leadership opportunities as we partner on the community service level. So working with Magnolia Gardens and getting them out there to interact with people with adults with disabilities and adults who are shut in. I mentioned before talking about Prancing Horse, going out there and working with children with disabilities. And eventually we're going to have our students find what causes that they're passionate about so that they can get involved and they can start to provide a leadership role there. So every Wednesday, we actually don't have class. In the traditional sense. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we've got our classes. But then on Wednesday, we go to Mass in the morning, we do community service for 3 hours, and then we come back and we unpack that Socratically. We have a conversation with them about, hey, how did your character grow? What could you have done better when you were in that moment? Did you see any leadership opportunities? If so, are you happy with how you seized it or you did not? And so it's going to be this process where we're going to bring in some intellectual rigor and some psychology and some theories, but ultimately it's going to be about reflection and about personal growth. Because anybody, but especially children in the world today, they need to be taught and to practice reflection. It's not just just go reflect, sit there and think about what you did. You need structured help to think about how did that go and what can you do better next time. And so we're going to provide all of that on our Wednesday. And how our students do there is going to be 30% of their grade. And so it's not just something that we're saying is important to the development of our students. We're actually measuring it, and we're going to be giving feedback to our students, because to us, if they're not growing in their faith and in their service mindset and in their character and in their leadership, then we are not doing our job. We do not want to just see them grow intellectually and to learn more math and learn more science and English and writing. And we also want to see them grow in these other ways that often people will call the soft skills.
So many times in my business, I see people in our business who don't understand they have power and how to use it. They're almost afraid of it. And but what you're trying to catch them in the formative years so that they can express themselves. And these are the people that come forward and they're always on the balls of their feet. They're always proactive as opposed to, what are you thinking about me? And it's all about me.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about, in the first set, which is this: how do you flip a person's mindset from focusing more on themselves and what they can do for themselves, and really more about what they can do for other people. And again, it's really synonymous with a service mindset, but the more you can cultivate that and develop that, especially at this formative point in their lives, age 14, 15, 16, you are equipping them with the knowledge and the tools and the resources to live, ideally, the rest of their life with that mindset.
And outward.
Right.
and not inward.
Outward. And again, the more you focus on living that mindset about how can I be of value and service to other people, it will spill over and have all kinds of positive ripple effects on your life and, of course, the lives of everybody around you. And so if only we had more of that mindset, I think, in our country, we would have so many more people thinking about, well, what can I do to help other people? And every time you see someone helping someone, it lifts you up. I had an experience at the grocery store the other day. When you saw that, like, I was not in the best of moods. I had a bad, phone call with customer service a little bit.
You had a bad minute.
Exactly. I had
not even a bad hour.
Exactly.
Okay.
I had this time, and I go in there, and like this interaction was just one interaction. Someone lifted me up just through a smile and bringing like this mindset of, hey, this is not about me and cutting your deli meat. This is about you and making you feel valued. And the more that we can do that, and again, this has to be taught for a lot of us. This is not something that a lot of people just instinctively do or instinctively get, but it can be trained. It can be taught, especially in teenagers who are very well accustomed to focusing on themselves. We've seen it time and time again. They can be taught to think outside themselves. And we saw it last year, and it was amazing to see the growth in our students as we push them and challenge them to look beyond themselves.
We have to have you come and talk at our office. There are a lot of things that you're saying that applies to people of all different ages. So many things I want to ask. Give me a little bit of background about Father Vincent Capodanno.
Sure. Yeah, so when we first met about 20 months ago and we were thinking about the name of the school, we were here in a military community.
Yeah.
We thought about St. Joan of Arc. We thought about some other people who had, some sort of military ties. We thought about, Fulton Sheen. We thought about Father Emil Capon, who was awarded the Medal of Honor for his valor in Korea. But really we settled on Father Vincent Capodanno because his story was just so moving. He was born and raised up in Staten Island.
One of 10 kids.
So that's right. There you go. So he's up there, and his mindset. He went on and he became a missionary priest.
Yeah.
And he was in the Far East for I think about 8 years or so.
Yeah. And
then he felt called by God to go serve the men of the Marine Corps. So he joined the Navy, became a Navy chaplain. And last year was actually the 50th anniversary of when he was killed. So on September 4th, 1967, in the Khe Sanh Valley of Vietnam, he was running out under fire. Bullets were flying everywhere to provide medical aid and to administer last rites over a corpsman, a doctor, a Marine doctor who was dying. And that's what he had been doing all over the battlefield that day. He was running around. Everyone's like, Father, what are you doing? Like, he's running around and praying over Marines who were injured and who were dying. And finally, he was exposed out in the open and was shot 17 times and was killed instantly. So he was posthumously awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, the nation's highest award for valor in combat. And when you read his story, when you read his book, there's a book called The Grunt Padre. He was just known as being one of those chaplains, the priest who was out there on the front line. He was out there facing danger and the dirt and the lack of sleep and all the things that his Marines were experiencing. He experienced them too. And when you learn about his life and how he lived for others and all these things we've been talking about, in obviously a much less intense way, but than what Father Capodanno did, but he lived so intensely for other people, and that mindset is something that we want to permeate our school's culture. We want that mindset to, of our namesake, to be, how do we think more about what we're doing for other people? And so it's an incredible story. In
a lot of ways, what you're talking about is the antithesis of what we see a lot today is a sense of entitlement. That's a challenge you have to deal with all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I even catch myself sometimes, here I'm 38 years old. Sometimes you can kind of feel like, well, I've served in the military for 13 years, what am I entitled to? And I think that, again, so much of that, of an entitlement mindset, which again, a lot of, especially adolescents, teenagers in our country, they tend to have more of that mindset because They don't necessarily know all of the things and all the sacrifices that people in their family and people in this country have made to get us to where we're at today. But once again, that entitlement mindset keeps coming back to and in focus on self, right? What is in it for me? What do I deserve?
Right.
How can my life get better? And it's not a focus outward and a focus on others. And so, but it's not just adolescence. It's really, as you just said, this stuff, this positive psychology, this application of our Catholic faith. These things are applicable to people of all ages. And, we're just so excited at our school to be not just building a community of students, but also of adults and educators and people from the community who are supportive of our mission, because we all need to hear this message. We all need to be reminded of it repeatedly.
I don't know if it's my advanced age, but the perspective I've evolved into is you serve yourself by serving others. And there's a lack of pressure. Your foot's off the pedal, and things just flow. And you build things without like going out in the morning saying, I have to do this, I have to do that, because you're still doing it about yourself. Mm-hmm. It's all the goals I have to meet. When you get to that point, life becomes easier.
Yeah. No, it does, and you look at someone like a Mother Teresa, now Saint Teresa, and you look at how she lived her life. She was so happy, right? And we find, and life becomes a dance for joy when we are living life for other people, right? And this kind of gets in back to the school about, especially this teenage and these teenage years, and about how important this is, Bill, because there is a lot of messaging today, really, to teenagers. Once again, is about yourself, and so we know that through our messaging, through our instruction, through our school's culture that we're building, that we are teaching children to know that is not true. That when you focus on other people, that's actually how you grow and how you become happier yourself.
How do you keep those kids in that environment? They go home, they turn on the TV, their friends, they leave the school. The influences of the media, it's so powerful.
Yeah, it is. And so if you look at how many waking hours there are in a day, and you're never going to be able to control all of the influences that come into children's minds. You can obviously do your best in a period of time. And so we've got them for close to 7 hours a day. So our belief and our mindset is that we can do that effectively enough where all these other outforces, essentially kind of think about it like an armor. Like you now have this armor, right? Your faith and your understanding of why I need to live my life for other people and why I need to grow my character and why I need to lead. That right there becomes your resistance or your antidote, to some of the false messages that are being pushed out there about what you need to do. And our belief is that 7 hours, that's a long time in a day, and if we can do that for 35 hours a week,
it's a lot of positive conditioning.
That's a lot of positive training and conditioning with how to, how to think about how to live your life. And that to me is, while there are going to be negative influences that come out there, to me, that this is it. Like that's plenty of time to be able to prepare them to be able to resist those false messages.
Would you consider your curriculum successful if your students have been taught to at least make choices, to discern between what they know and what they see, and to be able to make positive choices?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a huge part of what people would call executive functioning, right? Being able to make good decisions. And that's another challenge we see in the world today, is that so often as children are raised in the world, like so many decisions are made for them. Parents are making lots of decisions, from everything from what they're going to eat to what they wear to they make lots of these decisions, what sports they play, where they have to go. And a big part of our mindset is around independence and around how do you make these decisions for yourself, because you're going to come to that point in life. Let's say you graduate from Father Capodanno High School, you're 18 years old, whatever you go on to do next, go to college, go into the military, go start a business or a nonprofit, which, by the way, we want our students to do all those things. There's definitely going to be those moments when you have to make those decisions, on your own. And so that's part of our whole process of empowering them, especially on those Wednesdays, to make decisions, to plan, to lead, to execute events, because they're going to need to do that in life.
Yeah, we're going to come back in the third set. We're speaking all about the second year of Father Vincent Capodanno High School, the 4 pillars, the influence that they want to exert and expose the students to, not just academics, but character, leadership, and service. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our final set of All Things Moore County. The Father Vincent Capodanno High School is having an open house this coming Monday, August the 6th at 5:30 at the school. You'll get a chance to meet Mike. And I guess parents are going to come, and some of the questions parents might ask are going to revolve around curriculum, costs, staff, accreditation.
Yep.
It's a new school.
Sure.
How do you address all of those
absolutely.
points?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've learned in this journey or these past 20 months is that, it does take time, to grow the school. You can't get accredited overnight. So, we're in the process right now. We've begun that process with a body that looks at Catholic private independent schools. So we've begun that process. We expect, as early as by the end of this school year, but certainly no later than some point beyond, into that next year, we'll be accredited. Cost right now for a high school, we actually keep it very low intentionally. So right now it's $6,500 per year. We also have some scholarships that are available. Some people who have donated and said, hey, I really want to be able to support families that want this for their children, but they can't necessarily afford it. So we have assistance, tuition assistance, so that it can be significantly lower than that $6,500 per year. Our staff, right now, it's been really exciting to see how we've done. We've had 2 women step forward. One of them is my wife. Another one is a woman named Frances Klotz. They are the co-administrators for the school for this year. We will be hiring a full-time principal in February. So we'll have a big Celebrate Courage dinner to honor Father Capodanno. We will be naming him or her the principal at that time. But for this year, it's those 2 women who are basically putting in 60 hours a week with no compensation. So that's how you get something off the ground. And we've got some other teachers that we pay basically on an hourly rate. And we've now just hired our first full-time teacher, Erwin. He'll also be at the open house. He's incredible. He used to teach up at Cary Christian, a remarkable young man. His brother actually went to West Point a few years behind me. And so he's our first really full-time teacher. Because we're so small right now, that gives us that flexibility. But as we move into the future, we've already started conversations with math and science-minded folks at places like Franciscan University, Catholic University, and some other schools that would be a really good pipeline. So we're really excited about the road ahead in terms of our staff. And then lastly is in terms of curriculum. I mentioned before, on the education side of this, we haven't talked a whole ton about what is our education strategy, but as you look towards the future and we look at artificial intelligence and we look at automation and technology and the jobs that are going to essentially go away in the economy of the future because of automation, we know that the soft skills are going to become increasingly important. How well do you work and get along with and collaborate with other people? So we have a really strong approach to our educational philosophy that emphasizes collaboration and interdisciplinary. So we're doing some things differently. So we're going to be teaching some of the sciences through how to raise chickens and, how to cook. We are doing our math through a problem-solving format that's very aligned with what consultants might use at a Bain or a BCG or a McKinsey. We are integrating our history and our faith. So we're going to be studying some elements of history through the lens of people like Mother Teresa and Pope John Paul II and, various people like that. So we're not just bringing this focus on character and service and leadership in our faith. That's all very important, but we're also taking a fresh look at the academic courses. And so in terms of the curriculum, in many ways, and this is why the accreditation process is so important, we are picking the very best of what we see from other schools, and we are bringing that in, and we're sort of building our own academic approach to how we can prepare children for the future, to not just have those soft skills and how to work together and how to collaborate, but also how to create and how to build stuff. It's not really just about taking tests and earning a certain score and then moving beyond the course. Because we know the research that 30 days later you retain about 10% of what you learned, and that you retain a lot more of what you create or what you build. And so much of what we're talking about is a academic philosophy that emphasizes creating and that emphasizes collaboration and working together.
I love what you say in one of your learning models. We strongly believe our students should not only be college ready at graduation, but life ready. Big difference. Distinction.
Yeah, there can be, right? Not always. Some people who are college ready are also on the track to be life ready, but very often, like, that's it. We know that it's not just about earning certain test scores or doing getting certain grades, because the reality is there's a lot of students out there that are very smart. They don't test very well.
Right.
And I met a lot of them. They were in the military.
Right.
A lot of my soldiers were this way. They were very smart. They could do a lot of things intellectually that I could never dream of doing. But you know what? They were absolutely not good test takers back in high school. And they would tell you that. They said, look, I was not a good test taker, right? So we do think that tests and assessments have significance and value, but we also want to push the dialogue and say, okay, well, what's the purpose of a test? Is it just to measure how well you can memorize something? Because the reality is we have these phones and we have all these, the access to the internet. We can look up a lot of information. We don't need to memorize as much as what we used to. Right? So the question now becomes, can we now flip that switch to get them to have wisdom, and to what can they assess and interpret with that information that they have at their fingertips?
I had dinner Friday evening with one of my brokers and her 10-year-old daughter. And she's a very articulate young lady, and she said something, and oldest of three. And she said something, and she was being very proper and being like the mother hen of the kids. Yeah. And I said to her, I said, do you know that you are your mom's conscience? She said, what? I said, do you know that you are your mom's conscience? And she looked at her mother like, Mom, I don't understand what that means. I said, so your homework this weekend is to find out what that meant. Yeah. And it's not just the meaning of the word conscience. Right. So she Googles it to read it. She couldn't wait. Yeah. And that's how kids. Yeah. You're talking. That's what you're talking about. Is she learning? I don't know.
Yeah. But no. But they're actually. They think about learning and how do you gather information 20 years ago. Yeah. You either had to talk to someone who had been there. Right. You have to go to the library and check out a book, or maybe if you had the Encyclopedia Britannicas at your house. But even those only updated every so often. So now, if there's any sort of new information, you get it almost instantaneously, and that is the reality of the world that we're living in. And here we are talking about it. Our phones are off, but we have our phones here, and so the question becomes, how do you have the wisdom to know and to interpret what that information is? And I'm not saying it's not important to memorize information. It is. You need to memorize your math facts and certain things and what words mean. But it's really become, I think, more about what do you do with that information? Because we have way more information at our disposal now than we used to when I was a student growing up. And it was really all about memorizing and about proving how much I could memorize and remember on a test. And while that is still, there's a role for that, I think increasingly each year that has less and less of an impact on whether or not a child can go on to become successful, in an academic career, because it really is about that wisdom to know and to interpret that information, not just to recall it from their mind.
How are you getting the word out about the school?
So we're on our website, capodannohigh.org. So we've got a website, and we are on social media. So we're on Instagram and on Facebook. Those are the two places that we update pretty consistently, and we share thoughts about our vision. We share thoughts about our approach to education, our approach to the importance of service and character and leadership. And then people can access us, by email. So you can access us right there on the website, submit a form, has some of our email addresses there. And again, happy to have conversations with people who've got specific thoughts or questions about the school. And then this open house on Monday, August 6th is a real big one. We're really excited about the chance to open our doors really for the first time, to show the community and to show potential students and parents what we're all about. And then I'm going to give a presentation for about 30 minutes or so, kind of laying out the vision of our school, laying out who we are, what we believe in, what our core values are, why we're doing what we're doing, and how we're going to not just educate, but develop our students. I'm going to lay all that out and then hopefully have a conversation with anybody who's interested in asking more questions.
Are you, as you go forward, looking at 2018 and 2019, are you envisioning obviously higher enrollment fundraisers, events around the school?
Yes, we're doing some of that. Eventually, I think we'll start not this fall, but next year we're going to have, I think, an All Souls Day 5K right after Halloween. That'll be in 2019. But our big event is, I mentioned this earlier, but we call Celebrate Courage, and it's a dinner fundraiser right around Father Capodanno's birthday. So his birthday is February 13th. So right around then, probably like February 8th or 9th, we're going to have a dinner this year. Super excited about the chance to celebrate, the courage of Father Capodanno and of our students and of people taking this bold leap into a new school and into a new model. That deserves to be celebrated, and it really is courageous for our students and for our families and for our staff and everybody who has taken that courageous step to really try to reflect that courage, albeit not under the threat of bullets and not under fire like Father Capodanno did, but to have that courage that we need to live our lives is absolutely crucial, and we want to celebrate that. So that'll be taking place in February. We'll have some other events as we get going, but right now most of our effort and our energy is spent on the execution and the planning and the 5-year strategy and the business plan and all of that.
Right.
And I forgot to mention, one of our supporters we've got is actually the founder and CEO of FedEx, Fred Smith. He was actually a lieutenant on the battlefield with Father Capodanno the day that he was killed, and he actually credits seeing Father Capodanno's courage in action as giving him the courage that he needed to launch FedEx back in 1971. So we've already gotten some really good support from some people outside of the Sandhills, and now we're looking to really ramp it up and get people within Moore County excited about what we're doing and how they can get involved and how they can support.
You said earlier in the show that you have 2 children who are at St. John Paul. Mm-hmm. What grades are they in?
So they're entering 1st and entering 3rd grade.
So you have a goal in mind, obviously, that they're going to transitionalize once they get out of school there.
Yep.
To move over.
Absolutely.
Do you have a relationship with St. John Paul?
Yes, for sure.
That's got to be a natural bridge.
It is. Yeah, it's certainly a natural bridge for students who are over there to want to carry on their Catholic education. And we've also found people who are moving to the Moore County, coming from, one of our students is coming just from Germany and from Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
And Hawaii.
In Hawaii. And so people come from all over. And so a lot of times I think they're looking for also a smaller high school option than, the bigger option. If you're new to an area, that's really challenging and stressful for students. So coming into a smaller environment and one that also has a different approach and a faith-based approach and a focus on leadership and character, things that, the military so often talks about and emphasizes, I think that's where we're going to draw a lot of our students from in the coming years. So yes, St. John Paul, but also as people move to this area with their high school age children.
One last question, and I'll take a layman's point and play devil's advocate with you. What do you say to people, parents? I need to put my kids into public schools because that's more realistic. They'll learn to socialize. They'll learn to get along. They'll see the ups and the downs.
Sure.
And if we put them in a closed community, they'll lose the socialization process.
Yeah, so
how do you deal with
I think, so I always tell people, so I'm actually the co-author of a book called Lead Yourself First. So I think that, this idea of leading ourselves and what's best for us and for our families is really important. So I would never tell anybody that, that this is the solution for your kids. What I can do is I can look at the facts around psychological development, emotional development of children at this age. And my response would be that 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds today in our country are exposed to lots of things, right, at a maturity level that just far exceeds even just 10 years ago what kids were exposed to. And because of that, I think that the children really need that structured conversation that's structured and like a very an intentional approach to how they're thinking about and processing all that they're picking up in the world around them. And so there is some benefit for sure to going to a bigger school. You learn how to interact with kids. There's more people that can become friends with versus not.
Right.
So there is inherently some benefits to going to a larger school, whether it's a public, private, charter, than our school. But what we believe really is that it's important, especially for people who have their Catholic faith, to continue to foster that faith in our school. But the smaller setting does not mean that our students will not be pushed outside their comfort zones. They're going to be given opportunities to lead in the community, to put on service projects, to do all those kinds of things. But they're also going to be still interacting with their friends in club sports and in their neighborhood in other ways like that. So it's about that 7 hours a day, 35 hours a week. What strategy do you think is most important to develop your children to prepare them to find their purpose for what they want to do as they become adults later in life?
I'm going to need to put 100 kids in front of you. You're a great speaker. Your conviction is off the charts, bordering on transformative. And what it seems like you're trying to offer the kids, a life of service. It kind of seems like you all are the role model, because that's what you're doing at the school. You're walking the walk and setting the example for them to observe. You don't have to say it, but they'll know it.
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Unbelievable. Mike Erwin, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Look forward to seeing you down the road. We have a great format here for future conversations.
Yeah.
And I'm glad Bob Klug called me.
Yeah. Awesome.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, everyone. Everyone have a great week. This is All Things Moore County.